Hi everyone, this is Emily versus Jamie. This is once again round 1, Perth Chess Academy, 13th of October 2018. So let's just dive straight in. E4, C5, Knight f3, D6, we've got Sicilian defense, and Bishop C4. I mean, D4, you've got a few options here. D4 is the most popular, called the open Sicilian. Bishop C4, yeah, this is often a lot of the younger players prefer to play like this, usually because they're used to playing E4, E5, and the bishop sits on C4, the Italian opening sort of thing. And it can be annoying for a Sicilian player when they first encounter it, but after a while, Sicilian players begin to love the fact that the bishop is on C4, because the general plan in the Sicilian is to advance your queenside pawns. I mean, if they play D4, you want to swap your side pawn for their center pawn and then work down the half open C file. But if they don't, you want to go A6, B5 with a big attack, and the bishop on C4 is actually vulnerable. It's a target, and black is going to gain moves later on because of it. So I don't know. I think maybe white should consider looking at the open Sicilian, or one of these C3 Sicilian lines. Even bishop b5 check is an interesting way to play. I just don't think the bishop should be on c4. And maybe now would be the time to start looking at open Sicilian and just form a general set of openings to play against all the different Sicilians. It's a lot of theory to learn, but the sooner you start learning it, the better. So c takes, knight f6, knight c3, and then you just need to learn a line against the knight off, a line against Sveshnikov, a line against the dragon. They're the main ones that you've got to deal with here. I mean, if we just go to the openings book, yeah, I even got knight c6, which can overlap with quite a few different openings. That can turn into a dragon. It can turn into quite a few things. I think the main ones you need to look at are a6, knight c6, g6. E6 is also playable. Knight c6 and e6 often overlap as the same thing. And then you've got e5, which is it's a fascinating opening. So anyway, let's get out of the openings book. Let's start looking at what happened in the game. So e6, castles, knight f6, and then knight c3 was played. It's all okay. I just think particularly these pieces on the queen side, the bishop and the knight, are going to be vulnerable and allow black gain his queenside attack much quicker than he otherwise would. I almost prefer a bishop on e2 than having one on c4. So bishop e7, d3. So we've got some sort of closed Sicilian. I mean, an alternate way to try and play a position like this is to go for an early a4 to restrain black's queenside play. But I guess you can wait until they play a6 before you do that. Okay, so d3, castles, and now, yeah, bishop g5, just developing. It's sensible enough. So sometimes in these positions, you got to be on the lookout to play an early e5. It can really disrupt black a lot. It pretty much forces a swap off. I guess it doesn't force it, but it's very uncomfortable for black to deal with. Yeah, bishop g5 I think is fine. h6, yeah, bishop just drops back to h4. That's fine. And now what? Knight e4. This is complicated. I hope these players analyze these variations, because you've got bishop takes e7 is answered by knight takes c3. Let's actually look at this variation. Bishop takes, knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes. What on earth happens at the end of all this? So the bishop can then hit the rook, and you're attacking both the knight and the rook. The problem with these lines is black often ends up worse off because at the end of it all, the knight's just trapped. But in this case, it's not trapped because the b2 pawn is open. Oops, obviously not going to take that because the rook is on pre. Maybe you would take it. I mean, rook e8 seems like the move. Bishop takes d6, knight escapes to b2. What is happening? This knight's still almost trapped. You've got bishop b5 hitting the rook, but the knight, I think, is always going to get out to a4 just in time. What on earth happened here? I think this is equal material. Why is Stockfish suggesting rook d8? What? Yeah, I don't get it. It looks like black is just losing to that. The rook can jump out to d5, but isn't this trapped? Or can you counterattack? Yeah, this requires a lot of calculation, and all this needs to be calculated out all the way back here when the knight jumped into e4. Maybe instead of taking the bishop, maybe there's just a perfectly fine option in d takes e4. And true, this bishop here on h4 is going to be the one that's actually forced. It's going to be taken, but this d6 pawn looks like it's going to be vulnerable at the end of it all. So takes, and then queen d6, and that leaves the c5 pawn. I'm kind of in favor of opening the position up and swapping off a lot of the middle, from white's point of view, I mean, because white is fully developed, and black has still got his entire queen side sitting in the corner, reading books or whatever they're doing. So you gotta imagine that any way to open the position up like this has got to be to white's advantage. Maybe not. The queen's vulnerable here to a rook d8, but still black's attacking with 2 pieces. White's got everything. Maybe with very careful play, black might be okay here. He might be able to just wriggle out and develop everything. It does look like this queen side is going to have great difficulty ever properly developing. That's probably the best way to play it. According to Stockfish, there's no win after bishop takes e7, which is surprising. I would have thought there was some way for white to nab a pawn out of all this. Takes, bishop e7. Maybe the bishop doesn't go to e7. Maybe it just jumps out somewhere else. Maybe not. No. Bishop takes, rook here. Bishop takes d6, knight takes b2. Can we just take on c5? Oh no, the bishop's on pre. No, that's forced. It's all forced. And then, yeah, okay, that's surprising. Anyway, let me just get back to the actual game. So in the actual game, d takes e4 was played, and we actually followed down this line here. And this is exactly what happened. Now, queen g5 was played. Yuck, no, bad. That's just terrible. White should be winning easily now after that. You can't afford to play a move like that. You got to get yourself, you got to get this queenside situation solved. Defending the c pawn with the queen is, I mean, firstly, you're just opening yourself up to an immediate f4, and you've lost the c pawn for sure. And you're just a pawn down. Game's over. That's terrible from that point of view. From the other point of view, a move like this at least lets the bishop to b7, actually lets your bishop come out. Or maybe you've got bishop a6 and trade off a few of these pieces and get your knight out at the same time. Well, okay, so that's not going to be played. But yeah, b6 need to be played here. Queen g5, I think that's just terrible. And here, if white just plays f4, it should be game over. Yeah, even e5. I'm a bit skeptical of e5 because it might allow rook d8. Maybe that's not a problem either, though. The queen just takes on c5. Okay, so yeah, just about everything's good for white here. f4 and e5 are the main two. f4 just looks great, and you're ready to march this f pawn later on. I mean, getting f5 in is a very attractive idea because you've got your bishop on this diagonal, and if you can trade off these pawns, this bishop just becomes incredibly strong. So what was actually played was rook a e1, which it doesn't. I don't like this move at all. I don't think there was any need to defend this pawn. It was perfectly defended, and you just missed an opportunity there to gain a free tempo on the queen. And this rook doesn't know where it actually wants to go yet. It doesn't know if it wants to be on the e file or the d file. It actually looks like it wants to be on the d file, the open d file. If you a better move would be rook a d1 if you wanted to develop this rook, because it stops rook d8 by black, and just dominating that d file. I'm not sure why it wants to sit on the e file, and once you put it here, you're committing yourself to a plan of f4, f5. Whereas if you put it on there, you're not necessarily committing yourself to charging this pawn up the board. Your rook might end up here. You might end up with rooks on e1 and d1 and just playing in the center. So yeah, rook a1. Let's go rook d8. And yeah, black is definitely getting back into this. He's still horribly undeveloped. Queen c7 is a bit uncomfortable for black to deal with. That queen is just a pain. And the queen's not, I don't think, in any danger. It can always drop back to g7. It's just making it very hard for black to develop. He can't play bishop d7 because the b7 pawn's on pre. This queen is still under threat of just being chased with f4 and this c5 pawn dropping. And the knight doesn't want to go out to a6. I think the bishop just lops it off immediately. Okay, knight c6 was played, which is fair enough. Yeah, that's sensible. And now, yeah, you can sort of see now the plan of f4 isn't looking as attractive anymore. The knight has jumped in the way of the queen, stopping the queen from taking the c5 pawn. So yeah, a move like f4 doesn't have the impact it used to have. I think you probably, from a positional point of view, you want to play it anyway, forcing the queen back to maybe e7. But black is unraveling and fixing the holes in his position. Probably the best thing to do here is just admit you've made a mistake and play rook d1 and just go back again and just challenge the rook down the d file. The reason I say this is it stops bishop d7. Well, you were stopping it anyway. But yeah. Okay, let's see what actually happened. Rook e3 with a rook lift, trying to swing the rook across maybe to here or here and threaten some play on this king. That obviously didn't happen. But yeah, you're sort of running into things like rook d7, and the rook can defend this and chase the queen away, and it looks like black can unravel. After rook d7, he can then go b6, bishop b7, and then double his rooks on the d file, and it looks like he's completely unraveled his position. So that's another reason why rook d1 would be better. So yeah, this rook ae1 is really what got messed up white's amazing, fantastic position. The rook going to d1 would have been great. f4 obviously would have just won a pawn, as would e5, I think. They're both very strong moves. This threw away a lot of white's advantage. Okay, let's just dive into it. Rook e3. And now rook d7 is great, but black didn't play that. Black played knight e5. Doesn't that just lose a piece? If you decide to put your, no, not like that. If you decide to put your pieces separated by one square, you're just asking for a pawn fork. Just f4. Yeah, according to Stockfish, just losing. So that's just an easy win for white. So knight e5, horrible blunder, and luckily for black, white missed the pawn fork. Obviously, knight takes bishop isn't a problem. I keep saying that. After this just takes the queen, and yeah, sure, the knight can't take the rook because with the queen off the board, this rook has got no defender anymore. Maybe the rook can go to d7. The queen will have to drop back to a square where it defends this rook. But white's just winning easily. So missed it and played rook g3 instead. And yeah, after queen f6, which I think is the only move, I don't think queen h5 is anything. I think it's, what am I missing? Do you lose your queen to bishop e2? Something like that. Go away. Okay, so queen f6 is the only move. Black found it. And then, yeah, so this bishop's on pre. Got to deal with the fact that bishop's on pre. Stockfish is suggesting f4. Doesn't that just lose a piece? Why can't you just do that? What am I missing? e5. This is cool. And guess what? The rook is being hit and the queen is being hit. And if rook d7, I think you just grab the rook. Bang. And you've won a rook? Well, you've won the exchange anyway. Okay, I missed that. Yeah, f4. It's just a counterintuitive move. That was an option here. I think what was played, just queen takes c5, is sensible and strong anyway. White is a pawn up, but black has solved a lot of his problems in terms of his development, and just plays b6, hitting the queen, allowing the bishop to develop. And even though black is a pawn down, his pieces have finally reached decent positions. And in this position, queen b5, I think, is the only move. And yeah, this queen is uncomfortably placed and having trouble, and black is just using that uncomfortably placed queen to fully fix his position. He could play queen to stockfish a6 is a thing. Weird. Bishop b7 just looks sensible to me. However, after b6, a horrible catastrophe occurred, and white played bishop b5. Yeah, I have no idea how this happened, but b takes c5, game over. And you know, white struggled on for a while. Black just played sensible chess after this. And yeah, there was a cool little checkmate at the end right here. Rook takes f2, really nice little ending to the game. Rook takes f2, rook d1, rook f1. Prior to, yeah, well, once you've just blundered a queen like that, there's no point looking at any of the specifics. But instead of blundering the queen, if the queen had gone to b5, here we've just got a position where white is a pawn up, and white's doing well. White missed her chances early on. She had the pawn fork back here. Knight e5 was a horrible blunder. Pawn fork, and just wins a piece, and just an easy win after that. So yeah, well done to black at the end there, finding rook takes f2. Very good stuff. Lovely combination. After rook takes f2, white has nothing. There's just nothing white can do. Yeah. Okay, that's it for this game. Hope you all learnt something. Goodbye.